This is Week Old Beans 9.5. My co-host Fowler is actually not here with me today. He is um, taking a little reprieve uh, with family. So he is actually not going to be here with me today. I'm here essentially all by myself. First time I've ever done the podcast alone, so please bear with me. I'm not one for prolonged talking uh, without some sort of co-host. I require a scene partner to make my artistry cohesive, if I to say the least. But I'm going to be talking about a couple things. Two actually very important things. One shorter than the other. The first one's going to be about sort of a continuation from the last episode regarding presidential candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr., the son of Bobby Kennedy. Um, and some remarks that he made basically about like vaccines again, because that's his whole shtick is vaccines. But some remarks he made about vaccine or not vaccines, COVID-19's effects on uh, certain racial demographics and the heat that ensued from those comments. And I'm also going to be talking about the writer's strike and the actor strike that's going on currently in Hollywood and across the entertainment industry. That's going to be a bit longer because uh, that is my primary area of expertise, considering that I you know very very aggressively studied those topics in school. So yeah, let's I guess jump right into it. Gosh, podcast formatting is hard because I can't play the video. I guess maybe I could play the video of RFK Jr.'s comments, or I could put it in the audio and let you guys listen. Um, you know, maybe I'll go ahead and do that. But RFK is kind of in some hot water, you know, which isn't new for him, considering that he's probably the most controversial Democratic candidate that's probably ever run for president. I actually can't think of a Democratic candidate with his like track record. But RFK is in some hot water because he made a statement at I believe a campaign dinner where he essentially said, well, I'll let RFK speak for himself. I'm going to play the clip for you.
And we need to talk about bioweapons. I know a lot now about bioweapons because I've been doing a book on it for the past 2.5 years, and you know the technology that we now have to develop these microbes, we've put hundreds of millions of dollars into ethnically targeted microbes. The Chinese have done the same thing. In fact, COVID-19, there's an argument that it is ethnically targeted. COVID-19 attacks certain races disproportionately. The races that are most immune to COVID-19 are because of the structure of the genetic structure, genetic differentials among different races of the receptors of the ACE2 receptor. COVID-19 is targeted to attack Caucasians and black people. The people who are most immune are Ashkenazi Jews and Chinese. But we don't know whether it was deliberately targeted that or not. But there are papers out there that show the racial and ethnic differential impact to that. We do know that the Chinese are spending hundreds of millions of dollars developing ethnic bioweapons, and we are developing ethnic bioweapons. That's what all those labs in the Ukraine are about. They're collecting Russian DNA, they're collecting Chinese DNA, so that we can target people by race.
So that was RFK Jr. Basically stating that he believes that the Chinese developed COVID-19 to specifically target Black and Caucasian individuals while sparing Chinese individuals and people of Ashkenazi Jewish descent. Now, I am not a scientist. I want to go ahead and preface this, but there's definitely some cause for alarm here. And I think actually Fowler and I had a short conversation about it a couple days ago. This actually speaks to what I said in our previous episode about how, um, you can take data that is rooted in truth and draw conclusions to them that are problematic. Um, the study that RFK is referencing is not untrue. However, the conclusion to be drawn from that, that the Chinese are developing ethnic bioweapons. I mean, I'd have to see a lot more evidence before I believed anything like that. Um, and even if it is true, I said this to Fowler. I don't know what the fuck RFK thinks he can do about it. If you want to sit here, I'm not going to sit here really and argue about the validity of is the CDC or is the Chinese government developing bioweapons that target specific ancestries. I don't think that's a really interesting discussion to have. And I can't really have it to the best of my ability because I'm not a virologist or a scientist. Um, all I can do is ask for significant, data that, points in that direction. The study that RFK is referencing is real, and I actually read it. And, all it basically says in a few paragraphs is that they found that COVID-19 affects different groups of people, affects groups of people differently. Um, particularly Black Americans, or African Americans. And the conclusion that I draw from that is not that it's some sort of genetically developed bioweapon, but simply that you know Black Americans are at risk of COVID due to the fact that historically the Black population of the United States is particularly um, uh, prone to poverty, and um, in an industrialized nation, poverty, basically means uh, diabetes, obesity, um, cardiovascular disease. I believe in the study, actually, the study states that um, cardiovascular disease and the existence of pulmonary heart disease is one of the primary um, risk factors that increase the likelihood that you are to die of COVID. And we know for a fact that Black Americans are particularly at risk of cardiovascular disease and pulmonary heart disease, to a startling degree. So all this says to me is that, like, yes, COVID-19 is going to affect certain populations differently, simply because certain populations have different health outcomes. Um, I would imagine Ashkenazi Jewish individuals in America are a minority within a minority, um, and are also higher up on the socioeconomic ladder, um, which means they have access to better health care. They have access to um, better doctors, and then there's just less of them. I mean, if you're a lower income individual, and we saw this with COVID. COVID highlighted a lot of health disparities in the United States between uh, ethnic populations living in poverty and those that were not. Black and Hispanic people more likely to live in urban areas, which increases your likelihood of potentially getting COVID because you're closer to people. You know, uh, you're just around more people when you're living in an urban area. Um, Black and Hispanic individuals um, more likely to have to work during the pandemic because they work service jobs mostly. More likely to work in, the service industry, which, working in the service industry, working at grocery stores, working at restaurants, even after all the restaurants open back up, working in any sort of like service industry, we know that those populations of people were more likely to catch COVID and passive COVID because they were just exposed more. Um, so I would chalk up something like this to, RFK either deliberately or non-deliberately. I don't know. And I can't say, and I'm not going to say for sure, misinterpreting, um, misinterpreting data. And I also think it speaks to RFK's poor media training. This is something Fowler and I talked about. When you're a politician, you have to be really careful about what you say. Like you can't just, it feels really good to speak the truth. It does. As a politician, I'm sure. We all think to ourselves, well, if I were a politician, I would get up on stage and say what I'm thinking, and tell the people the truth. But the problem with that is that the truth will come back to bite you in the ass. Uh, and the truth isn't always something that people need to know. And also, the truth isn't always the truth. Some people feel like they know the truth and they don't know the truth. Um, Media training is really, really important. Knowing what to say as a politician, uh, you know, even if you're, really, really sure of yourself, there's a time and a place. And RFK to me has increasingly shown that he does not have the best media training. Not everybody needs to know about the conspiracies you believe in. Sometimes moving in silence is better than speaking at all. Um, and now, do I think that RFK had malicious, racist intentions? I don't know. I feel like, I think the audio was only like a minute long. I feel like I would need to hear more um, of what he's saying. But like I said, it's drawing conclusions. Even if the data is true, it's drawing conclusions. Um, Definitive conclusions that I think is somewhat bothersome and not really provided substantial data. If he's going to make these sorts of claims, I would love to see actual empirical true evidence. Not just like a study that shows COVID-19 affects different populations differently, because we already knew that. And with any sort of health data, uh, like it's all corollary, and there's so many confounding factors. It's why the health industry is a clusterfuck, to be honest with you, because um, it's a very easily manipulated, easily easily tweaked field of study. So I guess that's all I'll say about that. Or that's all I'll say about that. I'm sorry. It's fucking almost 10 o'clock at night, and I'm very tired. I'm walking around my room doing this podcast by myself like a crazy person. If somebody looks through my window, they're gonna see me and be like, "What the hell?" Uh, but that's all I'm gonna say about that topic. I don't particularly find it too interesting. The media reaction has been really interesting. Um, so we'll see, how his campaign is affected by this statement, um, or if it's even affected at all. I want to dive right into the meat of this week's news. Um, the SAG-AFTRA union recently voted to go on strike. They were not able to reach a deal with the studio executives and the various film studios, and they were officially on strike, which means that the film and television industry has effectively ground to a halt. Um, uh, the only thing that could make it grind to a halt even more is if the Directors Guild decided to strike, but it seems like they're not going to be doing that anytime soon. Right now, WGA, the Writers Guild of America, is also on strike, and SAG-AFTRA is on strike. Now, the WGA, Writers Guild of America, they represent the screenwriters and writers of pretty much the entirety of the film and television industry, and SAG-AFTRA represents the various performers of the industry. Now, I believe the last time the WGA and SAG-AFTRA went on strike simultaneously was back in the '60s. Um, so this is really kind of unprecedented for, you know, at least my time and the time of, I would assume, most people listening. And what this means is going to have, and the outcome of this is going to have profound effects on the industry as a whole. Um, Now, two different strikes going on. WGA, Writers Guild, they are effectively striking over kind of the same thing that SAG-AFTRA is striking over. Many, many things. Working conditions. You know, the deliberate understaffing of many of these writers' rooms. It was bad before the pandemic. It's only gotten worse after the pandemic. Studios deliberately refusing to hire more writers in a writer's room, forcing their writers to essentially work 80 hours a week to pump out content. And all this is done to cut costs, despite the fact that many of these companies are many of these media corporations and film corporations are breaking records in terms of profit, yet they somehow can't afford to staff a full writer's room. There's also fears over the emergence of artificial intelligence, most notably Chat GDP or GPT. Is it GDP or GPT? I don't know. I used that shit like one time the other day, and it freaked me out. I stopped. Uh, um, but there's a growing fear in the industry, both on the writer side and the actor side, that the emergence of AI and artificial intelligence could potentially render many writing jobs obsolete. Companies will look to the algorithm to determine what their people want to see, and what their viewers want to see, as opposed to actually hiring real human beings to write real soulful stories. Um, and that is, people's livelihoods that are being taken away, and in my opinion, a form of human interaction that is being sullied and tainted in a way. Art is art is timeless. We as human beings, we have always utilized art to tell stories about the human experience, about each other, about our emotions, and the thought that we are now entering an epoch of time, or an epoch. I don't fucking know how to pronounce it, y'all. I'm tired as hell, so please forgive me. But the fact that we're entering a time period when um, the the human, such a crucial aspect of the human experience could potentially be removed and replaced with artificiality is actually very concerning to me. As somebody who is a writer myself, that frightens me. I'm praying that this gets resolved, and the Writers Guild of America, as well as SAG-AFTRA, can come to an agreement that benefits the artist. Um, SAG-AFTRA striking over very similar conditions, primarily residuals regarding streaming. Uh, Now, I'll go over what residuals are for those of y'all who don't know and who aren't too familiar with how film and television works. Back in the day, when cable TV was very large, right, when you had reruns of shows on, NBC and the various other cable channels, actors would get residuals, basically meaning that they would get paid a fraction of the money that was made from the rerun of that show. It was something that was built into your contract when you signed on to be part of a film or television series. Now, television has had a huge emergence over the past, I would say, 15 years. You know, the 2000s have been the golden age of film. The golden age of television. TV series are being produced, at alarming rates, and the emergence of streaming has only compounded that. So now we have hundreds of shows being pumped out onto these streaming services. Now, the issue, and this was an issue that, you know, we've reached its peak here, or it's reached its peak here. This is something that I've heard about going all the way back, 6, 7 years ago. Um, when streaming first became, people's primary method of viewing content. How do you how do you ration out residuals from streaming? If you have a show, like Stranger Things, or something else that's on Netflix that is viewed millions of times by millions and millions of people, how are you able to determine what the residuals for that should be? Because there's no reruns, there's no advertisements that are being broadcast during the runs of those shows that generate the revenue. You're just going off raw numbers. And so essentially what's happened is that, for many of these actors who, most of which, I believe it was, I think Jessica Chastain came out and said it was over 87% of working actors, they're not in like the upper echelons of Hollywood. They're not all Robert Downey Jr. and Tom Cruise and Brad Pitt. A vast majority of working actors are lower middle class to middle class. Um, and I'd argue with the pandemic, that amount is, the middle class working actor probably doesn't exist anymore, to be honest with you. A vast majority of people in film are, those residual checks can be life and death for them. It can be. They can be, whether or not you're able to put food on the table. Um, you know, the actress from Orange is the New Black. Let me look up what her name was. Hang on. Let me see. Let me give her a name because I feel like it's important. Um, Emma Miles, um, and Leah Delaria. Um, one of those actresses, um, I believe her residual check was $127. Now, for those of y'all who don't know, Orange is the New Black is one of the shows that put Netflix on the map for streaming. Um, it was, it was kind of one of their first original series, hugely popular, and it's really what helped catapult Netflix into dominating television when it came to, originally produced content. So the fact that her check was $127 for a show that probably, had it been aired on cable TV, would have raked in millions and millions of viewers. Or it did rake in millions of viewers, but had it been on primetime, regular cable TV, would have raked in, a couple million viewers per episode. It's pretty insane to think about, you know? Um, and it speaks to how this model is unsustainable in the long run. Um, how starving out the people that make you money is unsustainable in the long run. Um, Now, SAG-AFTRA is unbelievably powerful. It's an unbelievably powerful union. There's a lot of money that goes into it. You have to, if you're an actor, you pretty much are required to join the union. It's highly recommended. There's only a handful of actors who don't join the union, um, but it's highly, highly recommended uh, when you become an actor that you join the union. And there are various benefits to that. There is, your health care is paid for, which, again, you have to make a certain amount of money, I believe, and many of the actors don't make enough money to qualify to get their health care paid for, which means that a huge chunk of SAG-AFTRA members are working and not getting health care, uh, because they're just not making enough anymore to qualify for it. Um, but SAG-AFTRA is unbelievably powerful, and I think it's in large part because, unlike a lot of different industries, SAG-AFTRA, the arts in general, have always had a really contentious relationship with the executive party. Um, you know, uh, I was thinking about this before I started filming as an artist myself. There's nothing more that I dislike than being told how to run my ship. And, the directors, the actors, the writers, the visual effects, the various sort of moving cogs in the massive money making machine that is film and television. There is definitely a separation between the artist and the businessman, the CEO who runs the film production company, whose framework for looking at the world is one of a businessman, not of an artist. And those two, and then you have the sort of, I guess you could call him or her, the narcissistic director. I don't know. I feel like every artist, has a narcissistic streak. I certainly do, and I consider myself an artist. You kind of have to have it to produce content in a weird way. Uh, but you know, those two bodies have always sort of brushed up against each other in ways that have caused contention. Um, and I think it's part of what has bolstered this very, very strong solidarity between WGA and SAG-AFTRA, as well as between the various members of the union. You know what I mean? Um, it is a pushback against the authoritative, greedy figures that use you and essentially use your labor to enrich themselves. And kind of deprive you of your ability to make art the way that you want to make art. And so I feel as if, it's partially it is solidarity. And you see it with the actors that are making millions, because again, only 87% of only, 87% of folks, that are part of SAG are, you know, they're middle class to lower middle class. Only a very, very small fraction of Hollywood, is the Hollywood that when you scroll through Instagram. There are millions of other people or thousands of other people behind the scenes that you will never see. That guy in that TV show that you've seen a couple times, but you don't really know his name. His IMDb account is kind of scarce. You know, he's got to eat too. He's got to put food on the table too. Um, and so I see all of this as a very pivotal moment between the union and the the writers union as well, um, and I'm hoping that a resolution can, there can be a resolution. I'm hoping that the executives are not stupid enough to try to do what I heard they want to do, which is essentially starve out the folks that make them their money. Uh, it's like working in a restaurant. You never want to piss off the person that's responsible for your food. Uh, if you know what I mean. But I'm hoping some sort of resolution can be reached, and I'm going to keep monitoring the story and bringing it up during future podcasts. Fowler is not too knowledgeable about film and TV. That's kind of my avenue. I won't say much, but it actually is my expertise, quite literally. Uh, so I'll be keeping you guys updated on any developments about the strike. I definitely advise you to read up as much as you can about it. There's a lot of contractual stuff that I can't really go over just because it would take forever and it is kind of boring. Um, but I heard, and I don't know how true this is, and I don't know if this person is calling a bluff, but I heard that the film and television industry, if there isn't a resolution reached by September, that there could be some major, major financial consequences to this. But um, I'm going to end the podcast here because I think I've talked enough, and my mouth is getting kind of dry. I need to be sipping water while I'm talking. Um, Fowler should be back next podcast. If not, you're going to have me again talking. But thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you tune in for the next podcast.